talk to the legends of the creative and entertainment industries. We talk to those on the rise. Lance Dean Anthony Nielsen asks about the highs, the lows, and everything in between. This is Outcast Creative, and this is Industry Interviews.
Hello and welcome on this fine and rather cold evening, as we said, in the United Kingdom, for a very, very special interview indeed. Now, I don't often get to interview people in the industry that have not only kind of directly influenced my own creativity, but also somebody I have followed since I was a teenager. This is quite rare for me to get to speak to somebody who's been around in the industry for all of my lifetime, pretty much. And I have followed their work extensively during that time. My guest tonight has well over 100 credits on IMDb. I think it's even over 150 for scoring various films and television shows. He has composed the music for some of my favorite films of all time. In fact, I own several of his scores. I could hum several of them now at will. In fact, I could hum the whole album, not just one track for two of them in particular. And again, that's quite rare for me to be able to say that. The talent of my guest is just unparalleled. He's worked with huge names in the industry, everybody from Steven Spielberg to Michael Jackson. And if you look at his credits on IMDb, they are extremely impressive. We have got a lot of stuff to get through tonight. I've got a big list of topics here. I don't know if we'll get round to doing all of them, but I certainly hope so. If you have any questions for my guest this evening, please do put them in the chat, and I'll get to as many of them as I can, probably as we go along, but maybe towards the end. So without any further ado, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome composer, conductor, music producer, and all things in between, Bruce. Now, Bruce, how do I pronounce your surname? Because I don't want to get it wrong.
You know, my wife spent 20 years in England, and she pronounces it better than I do. But the way I say it is Broughton.
Broughton, okay.
I answer to Broughton, Bruton, Broughton, Brogton. I answer to a bunch of those, but I say Broughton.
Broughton, okay. Well, Bruce Broughton, excellent. And that sounds very American as well. Well, look, thank you so much for giving up your time today. Also, we must thank the wonderful actor Nick Rowe, who I got to direct recently, who, of course, played young Sherlock Holmes, which is a movie you did the music for, and we'll come on to that in just a second. But as I do with all of my guests, I'm going to ask you a few quick fire questions to start off with. There's no right or wrong answers here. If you can give short answers to these, the long questions are coming. But could you tell me the first movie you remember seeing on the big screen, taking into account that you were alive while the last days of World War II were being fought?
President Roosevelt was still in office when I was born. The first movie, it could have been one of two movies. One of the first movies I remember seeing was Bambi, because I remember being really shocked when the mother was killed. It may have been a pirate movie, but Bambi is the one I remember the best.
Bambi is actually the first film I remember being taken to see, and it was on the re-release in the 70s. But same reaction to you.
This is a re-release in the 40s. This is like 1947, 1948, something like that.
Fantastic. What was the last movie that you went to watch on the big screen that wasn't for like an event or an industry?
I hate to say this, but I can't remember the name of it. We just saw it a couple of weeks ago. The one.
Do you remember what it was about?
Yeah. There's something about war. The title was War. It was really well acted.
Oh, was it Warfare? Was it the ones where the Marines get trapped in the house and they have to kind of fight their way out? And
no,
that's a good movie.
The one with Oh God, I can't even think of I think they can't think of the guys' names, and they're really good actors. And it was a fun movie.
It will
Um,
come. It will come to you. It
oh,
will
it
come.
may not, but anyway, yeah. But it's still, I think it's still in the theaters. Although I saw it on streaming the other day as well. So
Do you have? This is a question I've always wanted to ask a composer at your level. Do you have a favorite movie composer of your own whose, soundtracks you like
yeah.
and you like listening to their music?
Oh yeah. My idol was Jerry Goldsmith, and I mean there are other composers who I've got a lot of respect to, and
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to meet a lot of them. Not everybody, but no, Jerry. Um, I always thought Jerry was just remarkable. And
Did you get to meet Jerry?
oh yeah, no, we had. I mean, we weren't, we weren't buddies or anything like that, but no, we were very, very friendly, and he was very nice to me, even behind my back. He was very nice to me, and he recommended me for. I think he recommended me for Tombstone because he couldn't do it,
Right.
and he recommended me, I think, for a couple of other things. I think actually I began working for Disney, the Disney parks, because I started on a big show that he was supposed to do and he couldn't get out of it, so I ended up doing it. So no, I was grateful to Jerry, but I never met anybody. In fact, I called him up shortly before he died because I wanted to tell him this. I said, you're the only composer I know who always made me think I didn't know enough. Because I would look at his movies and I would listen to his music and I think, wow, I really need to study more about this or more about that. I was on some of his sessions, and they were really always very interesting and very informative and very special. And no, it was always Jerry. Jerry, he was the best orchestrator I knew. He was the most creative guy I knew. He was great with film. He had a really good dramatic sense. And I would say the other thing that I liked about him, just as a film composer, was that I really do believe that every film that he got, and he got a lot of, not great films, he always tried to do a good job. Whatever he had, you could see him trying to make it better and do what he was supposed to do. So, no, I thought Jerry was spectacular.
His music was always very emotionally very immediate, and I don't know if you've got a favorite score of his, but I love Capricorn 1, and I really like Extreme Prejudice, the one he did for Walter Hill.
Yeah, I didn't see the last one. I saw Capricorn 1, and I worked with the director later.
Peter Hyams.
The one that I usually comes up as my favorite is Chinatown, although I could probably list a bunch of other ones. Right. He was he doesn't get credit for this, but he was a really good melodic writer. And he had a really great sense and understanding of harmony. There's a main title that he wrote to Magic, which is always been one of my favorite things. It's just, he was just very good at what he did. When I first came out of college, I worked for 10 years for CBS Television in the music department that doesn't exist anymore. But Jerry had been in the same department, working with the same people several years before, except he started in radio and I was doing television. And so I had access to a lot of his very early scores. And he did a lot of early scores where there wasn't much money in the budget to do a score. And he would come up with these really interesting combinations. A percussion player told me one time that he had done a 90-minute live drama on TV with Jerry. And the orchestra was a timpani and a clarinet. And I said, well, what was that like? And he says, oh, it was great. And I wouldn't be able to say that about many other composers of anybody else. I mean, he was so creative. And
have you got a piece of music, not your own, that you would whack on a Sunday afternoon to relax to? Anything comes to mind?
Well, I don't listen to a lot of movie music, but I do have a good memory of. Actually, I was talking about this the other night. I have a friend who is her husband's a composer, and she's the grandniece of David Lean.
Oh my God.
This was a David Lean movie. When I was in the Army 50, 60 years ago, whatever it was, my wife at the time and I lived in Monterey, which is a bay, and we lived right on the bay. I mean, right, literally across the street was the ocean. And one Saturday morning, I had Lawrence of Arabia on in the background, and this big sailing ship came into the bay with masts and the whole thing. I mean, it was, and then to hear that beautiful melody, you know, it was so movie-like. So I would say, if I were to listen to something, whenever I've heard that score, I've always marveled at the orchestration and the instrumentation and the color. I could probably do that with some other scores as well.
What about putting the instrumental stuff to one side? When you were growing out, what bands were you into? What groups were you into? Who was the first group that you bought their album on vinyl?
You know, I didn't get into that until I was a little older. I think probably the first one I got was the Beatles, and I was well into my 20s by that time. I grew up, my family, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents worked for the Salvation Army. And my grandfather was a composer of band music, brass band. So I grew up knowing about, when you said bands, I immediately went to brass bands in my head. I still have something to do with brass bands. And so I had a very classical university education, Tchaikovsky years. And I didn't listen to a lot of pop music. But when I got around the time that I was in college, the Beatles were really big. And I started listening to the Beatles. And after a while, I started to get it, you know. So I bought their albums. I remember buying Abbey Road, which was probably the first pop album I ever bought. I mean, really pop, you know. And I've never gotten to a point of disliking them. And I still think they're a spectacular group. I've listened to other people before, but my pop background is such that if you were to play me a song from the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, I would probably recognize the song, but I couldn't tell you what it is. I couldn't tell you who did it, or, you know, because I wasn't that deep into that. And by that time, I was into movies already, so I was sort of one-sided.
Did you ever take to a band called the Electric Light Orchestra with Jeff Lynne? I don't know if you missed it.
Yeah, I knew them. I would probably recognize their. Yeah, I remember the ELO. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first band I ever got into, and that was all because it had a spaceship on the front, and the album came out the same year as Clausen.
So I married a violinist who she's a New Zealander, but she lived in London for over 20 years, and she played in the orchestras there. We were out at dinner the other night, and ran into J. Peter Robinson, who's a composer, an English guy, and so they were talking about they didn't recognize each other, but they were talking, and she said, "Oh, did you work with so-and-so?" And he said, "Oh, yes, I did." And she said, "Who was the contractor?" And blah, blah, blah. And it turned out that they had been working on similar albums, which included Genesis and a whole bunch of early pop things, you know. Right. So a lot of those pop albums, if my wife were here, she'd say, "Oh, yeah, I played on that, or I knew him and I worked with her," or whatever, you know. Yeah, I mean, that's my pop knowledge and background is pretty all over the place. My two stepsons are heavily into it. And particularly the youngest one is very sharp with bands and who's doing what and who did what, the history of the bands and all that kind of stuff. But let's
move on to your early work as a composer, because it's been really interesting exploring your early stuff, because I've seen even more of your work than I realized, because I'm a massive history buff. And the two areas of history that really interest me are World War II and the American Civil War. And one of the first shows that you got to do the whole score for, as far as I'm aware, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and please do, was a 3-part miniseries starring Stacy Keach called The Blue and the Grey. Right. And most people tend to remember North and South because of Patrick Swayze, but The Blue and the Grey came on a couple of years before that. I think it was a year and a half before that. Right. And was quite a big event when it was on British television. It was quite heavily advertised, and everybody from school watched it and talked about it the next day. And I went back and I watched the first episode today with the, you know, you've got a very, it feels a very historical score to me, straight from the off. So do you want to tell us about that, how that job came about, and also just how you first got into sort of being drawn into the soundtrack, TV and movie world as well? Oh, we've got a bit of a tech issue.
Well, Actually, that was, I'll just keep talking. I've
Yeah.
actually done a lot of television episodes before that. I started working episodes probably in the early 70s. But that was the mini series that I ever got. And I think I'd probably done some TV movies before that. I was just getting into the long form things. And how I got it, I don't know. I must have been recommended by somebody. I met with the producer who ended up being one of the nicest guys I ever met, Larry White. And he told me specifically what he wanted. I mean, he wasn't a musician, but he said, what I want in this score is rather than the big score, and this really confused me. He says, rather than the big score, I'd like to have a score that plays things like when they're sitting around the fire. You hear kind of that, you hear something like that. And so you, oh, I can hear tippy tap.
Yeah, I can hear you. It's lagging occasionally, but do just keep talking.
On my side, it says it's caused by an unstable internet connection. Anyway, he wanted this, real sound, real indigenous kind of sort of sounds. And I got because this is the Civil War, we need some scope. But anyway, what I came up with, I did have scenes when they were on the farm and when it was very rural that I used harmonica and fiddle. But I also did big work.
Yeah, because I noticed you leaned into the instruments of the period for that score.
Yeah, I actually looked to see what was the period were as far as the concern, and mostly they were brass instruments, unusual instruments compared to what we use today. There was a lot of brass music, and quickly that the South, who were the rebels, didn't have time to get their own bugle calls together, so they used to use the same bugle calls the North used. And it got to be very confusing on the battlefield. Somebody would, play charge, and the other one would play retreat, and nobody knew who would go which direction. I mean, there were, confusions like that. I used some of the Confederate songs that were popular, and yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a great show, and for anybody who wants to watch it, you can find it on YouTube. Certainly, the last 3 parts are available. Finding episode 1 is a little bit more tricky, but it is out there if you do want to check out an early piece of Bruce's work. You also worked on another childhood favorite TV show of mine, which was Buck Rogers in the 25th century. Now, I don't think that you did the main score for that, because I think that the main opening title, I think, was done by J.J. Johnson with Glenn A. Larson sort of supervising it. But did you do the music for some of the episodes, or how did that come about?
I worked on the second season. The first season, I think Stu Phillips wrote most of the music. What happened there was they changed producers. And the former executive producer of Gunsmoke, which is a show that we used to work on at CBS, first show I ever got credits on, Gunsmoke stopped, and the next year he came to Universal and started working on Buck Rogers. So we knew each other for that, and I was a Buck Rogers and then he went on, after Buck Rogers closed, he went on to do How the West Was Won. Jerry Immel, the guy who wrote for How the West Was Won, also wrote the theme, and that was the result of his contacts through CBS, like I had, and I knew Jerry, so we worked with him.
How does it when you're doing a score for episodic television? How does it work in terms of the the briefing? Because I imagine the time that you've got to prepare and do music for serial TV, and I know you've done quite a bit of it. We'll talk about JAG later, but I imagine that the time for you is quite limited. You've probably got to churn stuff out pretty quickly. Is it just a meeting with the episode director and producer, and then you're away, or do you just want to talk us through how it works?
It's worse now, and I haven't really done series work for quite a long time. I did the pilot to the Orville for Seth MacFarlane. It was as much as I did for the series. But and I'll use an old series called Quincy that I work on. Quincy, and I did most of the scores for Quincy, and that was always a very, very tight turnaround. So I would look at the new show on Friday. I would write the music on Saturday and Sunday. I would record it on Monday, and then we would put it on the air on Wednesday. So that was really 5 days from beginning to end. I never consulted with the producers. I would see the associate producer when we had the spotting session, which is where you figure out where the music is going to go and all that kind of stuff. But we rarely talked about what I was going to do. They just let me do whatever I wanted. When you're the major composer on a session, you establish a real relationship. Like on Quincy, we really became a family. And the first year was done by Stu Phillips, and then again they changed producers. And I got on it for the last 4 years, and most of them were scores that I had done. So the editors became friends of mine, the producers became friends of mine. We were all just one great big happy family. When I went to Dallas, which was just a little bit after that, Dallas was like that too. Dallas had more composers, but I was on it for several years, and again, we became very, very friendly. I knew the associate producer because I'd met him. He used to work on Hawaii Five-0, which I worked on earlier. We were about the same age. It's very different from movies. And on movies, you get on it, and you may or may not ever have worked with the director before. You may never have worked for the studio before. And you have all these people who are not necessarily unfriendly to you, but it's kind of like, show me what you have, you know. Whereas in the series, you get comfortable, and you can take chances, you can do things. I had one score on Quincy, which somebody told me that they weren't happy with. And the guy who told me that was an editor or something like that. So I called up the producer and I said, did you guys have a problem with that last show? No, it was fine. Don't worry about it, Bruce. And I said, well, I was told that, you know, there was something about it you didn't like. And if there is, that's fine. Just let me know what it is. So I don't, no, it's fine. It's just no problem. I said, well, okay. And he says, look, Bruce, he said, it was not a problem. We just figured that whatever it was, you'd be back again next week. So they gave me a break, you know, they gave me a break. So I don't know what it was they didn't like about it. Never found out. They didn't care. They were happy to have me come, you know, because we were a family. It's like that. And now I don't know that so much how that is. The thing that makes it difficult right now is once the movies and television got into technology and digital thing, it made it very, very different and very in terms of television, where you may be doing a new episode every week. Now you have to present them with a mock-up, which is to put your score together on a synthesizer with samples and all that kind of stuff and play it for approval. Well, you know, on a TV series, you may have 7 or 8 producers. All these guys are producers. So you give them to all the producers. There's only one producer who really has the power to say yes or no, but you have to answer all these guys in this string of producers. And so you get back and you write the same cue maybe 3, 4, or 5 times, submitting it all the time. In the meantime, you're trying to get the show finished. It's really difficult. So it's kind of hard to do these things on your own. You know, you get a lot of help. You get people working with you, maybe making the edits and maybe writing cues. And in movies, it's sort of the same thing. Like when you see a movie with 7 orchestrators, it's sort of a sign that there were a lot of chefs in the stew, you know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just it's not a matter that the composers can't do it, that they don't have any talent, that they're untalented, or they're just shills. It's that there's really just so much work there. It's more than one man can do. And so you need a lot of help, and even orchestration. Although I don't think anybody needs 7 orchestrators. Probably a lot of the orchestrators were people who were writing music and extra music and all that kind of stuff. It's hard, but the movies. Sometimes people ask me, how long does it take to do a movie? In fact, I asked a composer this years ago before I started, and he said, as long as they give you. And I found out that composers used to like to have 6 weeks to compose the score to a movie, but sometimes you get 2 weeks. Sometimes you get 5-6 days. I mentioned earlier Chinatown that Jerry Goldsmith did. Chinatown was a rescore. He got 15 days. There's not a lot of music in it, but my gosh, the music that's in it is really intellectual, imaginative level, whatever it is, But so you learn to write quickly, and the great thing about it is you practice all the time. It's sort of like learning to play the piano. You have to get, boy, as a composer, when you're working on TV series, that's the best way to learn how to write, because you just write and write and write. When I was doing series, I would be working for about 8 months out of the year, solidly, 7 days a week, probably about 14, 15 hours a day, generally. And you start to develop muscles. That's how I learned to compose, writing television shows.
Well, let me move on to this is the moment when you entered my life, as in, okay, I knew who you were. So I went to see a movie at the Odeon West End, Leicester Square, which, for those people that don't know, was a very big, famous cinema. We had 5 in Leicester Square. We've got 3 big ones now. 2 of them have gone. Unfortunately, this is one of the ones that's gone. And it used to seat about 1,200 people. And I went up with 2 girls from my year at school to see this movie for my birthday. And it was the first time my parents let me do my birthday movie trip in the West End. So it was quite a big deal.
With 2 girls.
Sorry?
And with 2 girls.
And with 2 girls, yeah. One of whom later became my girlfriend. That was all part of the plan. I was trying to impress them. And it was the first time I'd seen a film in 70mm. It was the first time I'd seen a movie with proper surround sound. And I mainly wanted to watch the movie because of the actors who were in it, although I was a fan of the Western genre, but it was the actors who attracted me to the film. Big fan of Brian Dennehy. And I already knew who Jeff Goldblum was. And that film was Silverado, which I have the soundtrack for here. I also have an original cinema poster for this. This is an American import, actually. The British vinyl had a different cover to this.
Oh, really?
And I bought the British vinyl first, but it was scratched. And when I took it back to the shop, it was a special shop in London. You might remember this shop. It was called 58 Dean Street Records, and it's no longer there. It was owned by 2 twin brothers. I still have a bag for it. And this shop in London, Soho, sold nothing. It sold nothing but movie soundtracks. That was all it sold. Movie soundtracks, nothing else. And they were the only shop, apart from Tower Records later, that got American imports. So when I took my British Silverado soundtrack back, they had sold out, and the only one they had in was the American import, which was twice as expensive. So they gave it to me for the same price. So I lucked out there. So this was the first soundtrack of yours that I ever owned, and I played it to death. Absolutely loved it, because I'll never forget the opening. The first time we hear your music isn't at the very beginning of the film, because the whole 2 minutes of the opening of the movie is just sound effects with the gunfight. And then he opens that door, and you've got that shot, and we pan onto that vista, and then you do that thing with the piano keys to sort of set the tone, and then we go into that traditional, you know, I could do the whole soundtrack like that, but I won't for the benefit of people watching. Yeah, it was so good, and I was just so in that world. And I think really that's one of the things that music is so important about, not only underscoring the emotional narrative of a scene, whether it's a chase sequence or whatever, but it's about drawing you into that world. And straight away, your score puts us in the world of Silverado and Lawrence Kasdan's, you know, Western empire of this movie. It's still one of my favorite Westerns of all time. It was a bit of a commercial, wasn't the success that they wanted it to be, but it's really beloved now. And I think your score in the movie plays a massive part of that. So having given it that glowing introduction, tell us how the job of Silverado came about and how you got to work with Kasdan and got the score for this. And I'll turn my camera off to try and facilitate a better connection. There we go. We've got slight audio lag again, I think.
Sorry, Lance, this may be on my end.
That's okay. Did you hear my question?
No, I was starting to say that it wasn't the box office success that they were hoping for, but it never went away, and it became a big video hit, and then it's on television all the time. That and Tombstone, both of them.
How did you come to get the job?
I had done 2 features before this. The first one, my very first feature, was for Billy Graham, the evangelist. The second feature I did, because I had already done the Billy Graham thing, was a feature for MGM called Ice Pirates. It wasn't a very good movie, but it was perfect. MGM movie was great. So I had a little bit of movie credits, but not much, but I had a lot of television credits. And so my agent got me a script and got me a meeting with Larry Kasdan and his brother Mark. They had co-written the script, and with Carol Littleton, who was to be the editor, the film editor, and primarily with Larry. In fact, it was entirely with Larry, because I don't think I ever heard Mark or Carol speak. It should have taken about 20 minutes. Actually, it took me an hour and a half. And I shouldn't say it took me. I was there for an hour and a half. It was sort of like the beginning of a love fest or something, you know, because I had read the script, and I liked the script, but it was dense, and it wasn't a well thought out script. It was written in such a way that you could almost smell the dust or taste the dust, you know, in your mouth. And so we talked about the movie, and it hadn't been shot yet. And so this is all sort of like, well, what I'd like and what I would hope to do and what I intend to do and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. So it was a very friendly meeting, and I left it thinking, well, I don't know if I'm going to get the job or not, because he was still interviewing people. I said, but this is a guy that I know I could call again, because he's just terrific. I mean, we really got on great. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, he gave me a call at home. Larry gave me a call and said, I want you to do the movie. And of course, I got very excited. And he said, frankly, he said, I'm taking a chance. He said, but I've done things like this before, and I have a good feeling about it. Well, it turned out really well. He wasn't musical, but he was very, 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 very specific about what he wanted. When we did the spotting session, no, it was after we did the spotting session. We had a viewing, I think, just the 2 of us. And when it was over, he said, "Now, this is how I see the movie. It's in 3 acts. The act 1 is so and so and that." So he was very, very careful. And he said, "The kind of score I want is he said, this is a movie I'm making for people who have never seen Westerns before." And I said, "Well, you know, like who? Because Westerns, you know, I grew up with Westerns." And he said, well, look, he said, people like you and me, we grew up with Westerns. We had Hopalong Cassidy and Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and all that stuff. He said, but our kids haven't, because they haven't been making Westerns for several years. And the truth was that the last Western before Silverado that had made any money at all was Blazing Saddles, which was a movie, you know, and a parody. So he said, I'm making a movie for people who've never seen Westerns. And the kind of score I want is a big traditional Hollywood Western score.
Right.
In my mind, immediately there were two scores that popped in, which was The Big Country by Jerome Morose, which is a great, you know, great score, but not a traditional Western score in terms of how the scores have been done before that. This is more like Broadway meets Hollywood. I mean, it's very, very, very big and really very cool. Great melody and all this outdoor stuff. And then the second one was Magnificent Seven of Elmer.
Yeah.
And so that, you know, and the thing about Elmer's score is it has a lot of power. You know, there's a lot of bum, 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 bum. So this movie, the four guys that you've got on the screen right now actually weren't all that well known. They were. This was Kevin Costner's first big movie.
Yeah, he'd only done one film before this, Fandango.
Yeah, well, he had also been in the movie that Larry had just done. I can't think what it was. Anyway, he played the body.
No one knew who he was yet. It wasn't yeah.
But anyway, but the other guys were just coming, you know, and now of course they're all really, really well known. The biggest star in the movie was John Cleese.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, and the thing was, it really wasn't a movie with a cast of thousands. I mean, it had a really limited budget. And I asked him why he didn't do. I said, you've got everything in this movie except you don't have Indians. He says they were in the original script, but he said they were too expensive, so we couldn't put them in. So if you look at the movie, it's really it's a very traditional Hollywood Western. You have the good guy and the bad guy. They meet each other at the beginning. They say goodbye at the end. The first lines are "Hello, Cobb. Hello, Peyton." The final lines are "Goodbye, Cobb. Goodbye, Peyton," as they, you know, have their shootout. And all the stuff that goes in before is sort of Larry and Mark's version of the traditional Western. And so I saw it as being a film about friendship. These four guys, two of them are supposed to be brothers, but these four guys meet each other by accident and then try to leave each other, and they're come together through circumstances. So it's a family. And then two of them, the brothers, go to meet their family. So the whole thing about the family and the you know, the sister and the nephew, and that all becomes part of the thing. So it had a lot of feeling in it. But in terms of the good guy, bad guy, it was sort of like a white hat, black hat movie, where Brian Dennehy was this great villain.
He's so good in this film.
Oh, he's tremendous. He's big, you know. I mean, I'm tall. I'm 6'2". He was like 6'4", 6'5", and, you know, big guy. Jeff Goldblum was a bad guy. So when they were bad, they were really bad. When they were good, they were really good. You know, so it was one of those kinds of scores where everything was very well delineated, and the power was definitely part of it. So I went for the power, and I went for the big tune, because I generally do anyway. But these Westerns needed a big tune, and it ended up being, you know, Silverado. So it turned out, and what was really cool about it, because I was brand new to all this stuff, was that the music became well known immediately. I mean, the music just sort of took off. It became a big sporting theme. You know, you hear it on TV, all that kind of stuff. So it was really fun. I have nothing but good memories about all of it, about Larry and I went on set and met all the guys and watched them shoot it. And
I was about to ask if you went to the Serum Pelham Ranch, because there it is. It's still there. Yeah.
Well, they built the town for Silverado.
That's right, and it's been used in about 200 movies since. Gradually, bits have been added to it and stuff. The whole thing was actually up for sale. I think it was just before or just after the pandemic. It might have been 2021, or it might have been 2019. Not just the Western set, the whole, you know, the whole ranch, like however many 480 acres or however, including there's a hotel. You can't really see it, but it's there.
Well, when they were shooting it, I remember talking to Larry when I was at home, and he was up in Santa Fe, and he says, "No," I said, "It's beautiful." He said, "You got to come up here." He said, "It's really beautiful." So I did, and it was really beautiful. It's very high. It's about 7,000 feet, 7,500 feet, and
yeah, it snowed. It snowed for quite a lot of the shoot, didn't it? It was snowing.
Yeah, it did. In fact, at the very end, when they have the shootout, the two guys meet on the street, and the street's just all dirt. But actually, what happened the night before, it had snowed. And so every once in a while, if you look carefully on the street, there are some wet spots because the guys came out with blowers and they blew away all the snow, and they would put dirt on top of the snow. But there are a couple of things where the snow leaked through. Yeah, it was cold. It was cold, but it's just a glorious part of the United States. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, I one of my life goals is definitely to visit that set for sure. So after you did Silverado, which was it's a benchmark score, any producer worth their salt listening to that score would go, "Wow, we've got a contender composer here." Did doors open up? Did you get a lot of offers? I know Young Sherlock Holmes came fairly soon after that, and that was Spielberg producing.
Yeah, while I was working on Silverado, I got the script to Young Sherlock Holmes. And Larry came over at one point to hear what I was doing. So I played him the score on the piano, which, sounded like chopsticks. And he happened to look on my desk and he says, "Oh, you've got a score from, I think it was Amblin or DreamWorks. Well, I think maybe it was Amblin. I don't remember which company it was, but
yeah, it was Amblin, I think.
Amblin. Okay. So he said, "So what are you doing with Amblin?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I just got this script." And I said, "I haven't even had a chance to read it yet." So after Silverado, I got a call to have lunch with Barry Levinson, who was the director on Young Sherlock Holmes. Now, what was kind of interesting in this is that they were both new directors. Larry had done two movies before this, Body Heat and the one that I can't remember. And then Barry had also done, I think, two movies before this. Very, very, very different from the movies that they did here. And so I had lunch with Barry, and he was trying to figure out whether, he was going to hire me or not. And so I said to him at one point, I said, "Why don't you talk to Larry? Because you know Larry." And he says, "Oh, I've already talked to Larry." So anyway, so they picked me, and that one turned out well too. It turned out really well. And it was sort of all the things that Silverado wasn't. It was Silverado was very straight ahead. It was good, bad, white hat, black hat, bad guys, good guys. Young Sherlock Holmes was about this really intricately wired kid, who'd like do deduction. And he had this very pretty girlfriend who was teaching him some of this stuff too, because she was really good at it. And she had an uncle who was sort of like a mentor of his. And then he goes to school and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And so it had all this intricacy in it. Silverado had two themes, the big one, and then there's one I did for the Settlers, and a couple of little motivic things. Young Sherlock Holmes had like 7 or 8 themes because there was just so much going on. And in Young Sherlock Holmes, it was almost like animation because everything was moving so quickly that no scene sat there for very long. I mean, you'd get the scene and suddenly you're off to another scene and people are moving around. So the score is sort of like that too. The score is very, very, very busy. There's lots of counterpoint in Young Sherlock Holmes. There are lots of styles. There's Elgar, there's Penderecki, there's they're just tons of styles because
another one I have the vinyl for here.
Yeah, that was a good one.
And Nick
and signed it. On the CDs, you get all of them. Oh, did I sign that? Oh no, Nick signed it.
Nick Rose signed it. You can sign it for me when you come to London.
Okay.
In December. But Nick was kind enough. I actually took it to the set, and it was the first thing I did. I said, "Right, before we go to rehearsals, I'm going to forget otherwise. Can you sign my Young Sherlock Holmes album?" And we did it while I was checking him into the hotel to make sure he was all settled. So it's a fantastic score. And again, it's another one where the theme tune sticks in my head.
Yeah, but it's a Silverado as well, but it's a really good movie. It's a really well-made movie, and both of them. Although I was terrified in both of them that they were going to dump me because I thought, who knows. But they were both really a joy to work on. The week that I spent recording Young Sherlock Holmes was so much fun. And the guys came on set, which was, and then not on set, they came to the studio, so it was fun to watch them, to meet them. No, it's a really great memory. So yeah, I like the music.
I don't know if you saw the interview I did with Nick, but I can't watch this film now even and watch the scene where the boys are all talking about their careers, and then one of them says to him, "And Holmes, what do you want to be when you're older?" And then he looks out the window and says, "I never want to be alone."
Yeah.
And then you've got that piece of music that comes in. It's like a slow version of. It's really like the slow version of the main.
Yeah, the love theme is a version of the main theme because
I get it.
They're like the same person. He and she were so well together.
You've got that piece of music that connects them, and then you do a recurrence of it again when he looks up at the window, and then there's another one where he's at her graveside. Oh man, every time, because I've lost quite a few friends that were sadly passed away very young, and it's pieces of music like that and moments in movies like that we connect to that emotional tissue in our real life. And then when we then put the soundtracks on at home and you sit there and you put the headphones on like we used to do back in the 70s and 80s, you're conjuring up, you're not just seeing the film, you're now connecting the music to these moments in your life that have that same feeling, that conjure up that same emotional tissue that was in the movie, but somehow you're relating it to something in your own life. That for me is the power of an amazing soundtrack. If it does that, then it's really speaking to you. And
that's actually nice to hear. In the last year or two, and for some reason not once before then, I've started getting emails from people who people I don't know, and I don't know where they get my email. Oh yeah, they get my email address off of my website.
Yeah.
And what they do is consistently, they're not asking for anything. They just write and thank me for the score to something that I did 30 years ago. Usually there are things like Homeward Bound, which is a family movie, and The Rescuers Down Under, which was a Disney animated movie. Really fabulous movie.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are other movies, and they tell me that for 30 years, they've listened to this music, and when they get sad, they play it, and it makes them feel this way. And I have to tell you, it caught me by surprise. And maybe every composer gets something like this. I don't know. But for the ones that I get, I'm very, very, very appreciative that the music for what's basically a commercial job is so powerful to be able to last for 30 years and be meaningful to people. And that makes you feel good. That makes you feel really good.
Well, I think you shouldn't underestimate the emotional impact of a score, because all the best scores that I've got on vinyl that I used to listen to when I was younger, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I still listen to them now. They're just all queued up on my YouTube or my SoundCloud or whatever. But all the best ones, they're all attached to specific memories, and it'll be something to do with the film itself and going to see it and who I went to see the movie with, and there'll be those memories. And then there'll also be the memories of the things that I thought about at the time and how that music put a layer on my own life. Because you've got to remember, these scores came out at the time of the Walkman, and us movie guys, we were recording these onto D90 tapes, and we were putting them on our Walkmans, and we were cycling through our neighborhoods, and the Sherlock Holmes chase music became the chase music for us racing to get to work, or the romance piece from another one of your films became the piece of music that we listened to when we were thinking about asking that girl out and buying her some flowers. So all these pieces of music that you've created for us and the movie they all tie into personal things for us. And I'm glad I'm getting the opportunity to tell you this, because I guarantee you there'll be people watching this interview screaming, "Oh my God, that's so true." Because I've had this conversation with hundreds of people who are movie people.
That's interesting. As a composer, we talked about Jerry earlier. There are many composers whose music I love and revere, actually. And just to pick one out of a hat, this is a classical composer, but Dvorak was one of those guys. He came to the United States for a while, and he taught music at Juilliard School of Music. But I thought, man, if I had ever met Dvorak on the street, I would have knelt down and kissed his toes, because there are some things that he's written that strike me. You get to guys like Bach and Debussy and Bartok and even Rachmaninoff and guys like that. And what's so cool about this is that I have friends who are really good composers, some of the film guys, and they write really well too. And you listen to their music and you go, wow, that's really great. And I know this guy. But you would never put that guy with that music, that person with that music. Yeah, it keeps you humble. So yeah, so that's a good movie.
Yeah, The Rescuers was one of my favorite films as a kid. When this one came out, I was a bit older, so I kind of looked at it with the older age bracket. But it's still a great movie.
It's probably the last. It was the last adventure movie they did as an animated movie with no songs, because it didn't do so well. And they thought it was maybe because it needed songs. I don't know what it was, because it was an awfully good movie. And Disney was really high on it when they came out. That's the thing about some of these movies, like Silverado, Young Sherlock Holmes, Rescuers Down Under, some of the movies that you have here above my head, they're timeless. You can watch them now. They're just. My son and I went to see Tombstone a couple of weeks ago in a theater. I'd never seen it in a theater with a crowd. And man, it plays great. There are no automobiles, there are no jets. It's just a Western, and everybody. It was made 20, 30 years ago, but it still plays.
I think that there are several things that cut that film above. And by the way, I also had the soundtrack to that here as well. Yeah, it wasn't available on vinyl by the time this came out. This was not available on vinyl, so I got it on CD.
That's right.
But there were three things that made that film a cut above. One of them was your score. The second one was the performance of Val Kilmer and his interpretation of Doc Holliday, and all the little things that he did with the role, like the scene with the cup, and then the third was the performance of Kurt Russell. This was a version of White Earp that we'd not seen before.
Yeah.
Now I'm glad you brought that movie up, because there's other people like Michael Bean Michael Bean, I think he pronounces it Bean. Who he's got a great podcast channel. I'm sure he'd love to have you on there, by the way. He's got a great podcast. I'd kill to get him on here. I'm sure he's going to be doing a few, but he's had some great guests. But he's talked about working on Tombstone and the production issues that it had, and of course the director George P. Cosmatos was known for losing his shit, and he replaced the other director that sadly got fired, which was a big shame, because I know it's kind of his pet project. And being a director myself, I know how devastating that would have been. I mean, by the time you got involved in that project, was that chaos all behind it, or did you come on earlier than that? Were you on board with the original director?
I came on pretty late. The first time I saw the movie, I only saw the first half of it, because they were still furiously cutting the last half. Right. And they tracked it with Silverado. And to tell you the truth, I hated the movie. Because with Silverado, it just didn't play right. I mean, it's really interesting what music does to a film when you've got the wrong music in the film, Because Silverado, after the screening, as I say, it was just the first half. George Cosmatos, who you just kind of nailed, walked out and he said, "So, what do you think about my music for the film?" And I said, "Well, George, I like your music a lot, but I hate it in this film." And so I really thought it was kind of a crummy movie, you know. So when I started working on it, I didn't have any temp score there. It was just me and the movie. And I started to get into it, and I thought, no, actually, this is pretty good, you know. And the more I got into it, the more I really got into it. The thing I like about Tombstone is it's so dark. There are no good guys in this film. They're all bad people, you know. Like Wyatt Earp, his brothers are more stand-up guys than he is. He's out fooling around with an actress. His wife's on drugs, and I mean, he's just there as a poker guy trying to make a lot of money, and he doesn't care who he hurts and all that kind of stuff. And it's so melodramatic. One thing about George Cosmatos, George was half Italian, and he really liked Italian movies. I mean, George lived for movies. And there's a lot of kind of Italian spaghetti Western in this movie. You know, the Clausen, the OK Corral and the Wink, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which actually are charming. And you can watch this movie over and over and over again. Val Kilmer is the reason most people would probably watch the movie. Also, I have to say the script by the guy who was supposed to be the director. The script,
Kevin Jarre? Was it
Kevin Jarre? Yeah. And to George's defense, Kevin, I think, had started on the movie and then was suddenly taken off of it. And George was put on it because George used to work with these guys a lot. And George got on it with no time to prepare. I mean, he was just suddenly he's on the thing, you know. But you know, George was a difficult personality, but he made a good look in this one, you know.
I've had friends that have worked with George. I had a friend who worked with him on Leviathan, who was the second unit director, and went to a talk he gave about it at the National Film Theatre. And his the one thing I remember about that was he kept basically saying every other day, all he heard from George was saying to someone, "You're ruining my movie. You're ruining my movie. Don't do it that way. You're ruining it. You're ruining it." And that was all they heard on the set all the time.
Well, you know, he worked a lot with Jerry Goldsmith, and
that's right.
Actually, so Jerry was supposed to do this movie, and Jerry one time wouldn't let him on the recording stage, and George was like sort of whining on the phone. Says, "Jerry, let me on the recording. I'd like, you know, I love you, Jerry." He says, "Yeah, but George, you can't be like that with people. You can't. I'm not going to let you on the stage because you're so bad with, you know."
He was quite abrupt, and
however.
Yeah,
he could also be a very, very, very sweet guy. So he had this, you know, when he was playing in director, he could be really kind of horrible to people, but as a person, he had a lot of stuff with him. But he really loved movies, and however this was done. I think that the thing about Tombstone that's probably a little distressing is you can see that it's had big cuts. There's some scenes that should have been there.
I wanted to ask you about that, because did you see a version of it with longer scenes and with more of like Billy Zane's character? Because we don't even see the scene where he gets killed. We just see the aftermath, which seems really weird.
That's the biggest confusion, because you just see that he's dead, and there's obviously a big scene that happened. And no, I noticed that the other day when we were watching the movie. But in fact, I thought when I did it, the movie was a little bit kind of all over the place. But when I saw it the other night or a couple of weeks ago, I thought it played well. And it's just so enjoyable. I mean, it's so over the top. Even the character standing in the street screaming in the rain after his brother was killed, and justice is coming, you know, screaming to the bad guys and all that kind of stuff. And it's a cool movie.
Because I mean, like the long scene where they walk up to the ranch for the OK Corral gunfight, they decided to cut that really long sequence, and then they use it on the end credits, which is really odd. And I actually would have really liked that massive build up to that gunfight. You kind of got it there, but I would have been quite fine with it being even longer, because that gunfight is so well directed, it's so well edited. It's a brilliant piece of filmmaking. And you know, the bit where Val winks and oh my god, and then the way you bring the music down with that. I also really liked the piece that you did for the arrival of the cowboys at the beginning. We got that dun 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 dun.
Oh yeah,
it's a really great piece. Did you draw on anything in particular for that, or was there any inspiration behind that?
No, actually, the Tombstone theme. Dee da 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 dee da 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 da. Originally, I thought that was going to be the bad guys theme. I thought that was going to be the Cowboys theme. And
Right.
The director didn't come over. George didn't come over to hear the score, but the producer did. And I played the theme, and he said, "Oh, he said, that's a really good theme. That's going to work great for the guys, for the good guys." And I thought, "Oh, yeah, I guess it will." So that became the Tombstone theme. It was originally made for the bad guys, and I didn't have a good guys theme yet, so that became that.
Because the poster here is very. You know what I think of when I look at this poster? It's like the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of metal in it. It's just rum, bum, 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 and you can hear a chain dropping, you know, with a lot of metal and all that kind of stuff. I made it as strong, as bad guyish as I could at the time.
Obviously, you're creating this kind of score. You know, this is pre the days of even not even Facebook. I mean, but this is pre MySpace. You know, this is pre a lot of the electronic software that was available to composers that would come along in the late 90s and early 2000s. What kind of size orchestra would you have to record this score?
I think it was probably around 70, 75 people. I had a lot of dark instruments in it. I used a contrabass sarrusophone, which is an instrument they used to use, particularly, I know it as an instrument used in France before they've used contrabassoons. And the sarrusophone is a brass woodwind, meaning it's actually a brass instrument, but it's played with a double reed like an oboe or like a bassoon. And it has a really big honking sound, you know. But the contrabass came across great, and you can hear it a lot through the score because it's just this very dark, low, evil sound, you know. I had, I think, a big brass section. I had low trombones. I had contrabass trombones. I had a cymbalum. I used the tack piano. I don't know. I just used in percussion, just beating the crap out of everything, you know.
And would it work the same way as, you know, directors? They go out, they make a film, and you know, they get their key guys. Like a lot of directors work with the same DOP, and some of them like myself, I've worked with the same HOD from my makeup department. She's done almost all my plays and all my films, I think. Shout out to Christine Nicklin-Rivet. Is it a bit like this with a composer? Do you have the same orchestra that you bring in, or do you maybe get the key, let's say the key 10 people at the head of the orchestra, the top of the tree, the key instruments? Do you bring, are they the same 10 people you've worked with before, and maybe they bring in some new people for you? How does it work building up that orchestra back then?
I would tend to work with the same people because I get to know their style.
Right,
and
exactly. Yeah.
So I'm confident whenever I write anything for them, it's going to sound in such and such a way. And also because they get to know me. So there's not a lot of questions and things. Now, the thing about this score was done in London. So this wasn't one of the Hollywood scores. This wasn't where I had my guys. And I had worked in London. I worked with the same, I used to work with the Symphony of London, had always the same contractor. We had often the same players. They had often the same contractor. I married one of the violinists. She was in, first saw her in Young Sherlock Holmes. And 12 years later, I married her. But in between, every time I'd go to London, she was in the orchestra. And so we would talk a little bit after the, I mean, I didn't know when I first saw her that I was going to marry her, but a good thing I did. I love that. I mean, there were a lot of people that I didn't get to know everybody as well as I got to know her, but there were a lot of people who sometimes when I would be doing a movie, I would call my fixer and I'd say, that guy who did the such and such, can we get him? And percussionists, and you know, there were a lot of people who were very familiar to me. And I think most composers do that. You learn to, it's awkward. We may be talking about Michael Jackson at some point, but
he's coming up pretty soon.
On the Michael Jackson date, it was a date when there were a lot of recording. There was a lot of recording going on. I was only there. We only had one day,
Sure.
and I didn't have an orchestra that I knew anybody in it, and consequently, they didn't know me. And I thought, wow, this is going to be kind of stiff, But it turned out okay. And the orchestra was, when you have a lot of depth in professionalism in the musicians, you can do it. But it's just easier when you're there with people who you know and who know you.
So, why? Okay, two questions. What was from the point that you got Tombstone to the point that you finished the score or recorded it with the orchestra with the film playing behind you? I don't know if that's how you did it. I know that's how sometimes it's done. What's the length of time there from right, I'm doing this project to it's finished? Here you go.
Well, it depends. Tombstone, I think I had less than 4 weeks, around 4 weeks to do. Silverado was done around that time, around 4.5 weeks. Young Sherlock Holmes was done around the same time, 4.5 weeks. Lost in Space was done in 2 weeks. And I had more music, that was really fast. Sometimes in some of the Peter Hyams always tried to give me 6 weeks. And it's funny, I was years ago, I was at dinner with Bill Conti, and who did the
score for the Garage Kid.
Yeah, but he did a lot of, he did the score to Rocky and a lot of other stuff. But he and I were talking, and we were talking about how long it takes to do a film. And he said, I don't know whether he cares if I say this, but he said, I always take 2 weeks. I said, what do you mean? He said, they may give me 6 weeks basis, but I know I'm going to do it in 2 weeks. So I just do them 2 weeks. And I thought, well, that's up front, and he gets it.
I mean, if you can do it in 2 and you've got 4 to put your feet up, that's fine. But then if there's some post-production or engineering problems, then you've got 4 weeks to come back.
Well, I already mentioned one of them. Chinatown was done in 2 weeks, because that was a redo. But there's another score that is one of my favorite scores. John Williams did the Reavers, which was also a redo. They had scored it with somebody else, and John came in, and he had 15 days to do it. And you listen to that score, and you think, wow, 2 weeks, really? Because I think that had more music than Chinatown had in it. And it's a really heck of a score. I mean, it's very Americana, lots of notes, and very, very Johnny Williams-ish. Not the John Williams who did all this Korngold kind of stuff. But I mean, John, it also shows the range that a lot of these composers have. Like John was he was a jazz piano player, and he was a piano player. He was a studio piano player for years and years and years. There's a book that Henry Mancini wrote on orchestration, and the records in there have, Hank writes, he said, the swinging piano of Johnny Williams. Well, that's John Williams, that same
right.
So he has all that knowledge, and then of course the years of him conducting. He's a real score studier, as was Jerry, and as were a lot of these guys. So they get an awful lot of range. I mean, it's you're a movie composer, and you've got to write a score that's about a Chinese story, or it's a Jewish story, and you're not Jewish, and all these things. Or you're writing a score about medieval things, and you want to use medieval instruments and medieval sounding music. And how do you do that? You have to study. A lot of times I go back to really early scores and textbook. Like behind me, this is my studio. Behind me on one side, on that side are all the scores, and on that side are all the books about music,
right.
Books, counterpoint and harmony and orchestration, things like that. So we're always studying and listening to be able to do whatever the job is at hand.
I've got 3 boxes of vinyl film scores at my feet. I only pulled out yours, but there's a ton of Goldsmith, Horner, Williams, Conti. They're all in there.
Yeah.
And I used to always prefer instrumental soundtracks over the ones where you'd buy it and there's like 12 pop songs on, and then maybe one bit of the score, and I'd be like, what? Because I always wanted the score, because I wanted to use my imagination.
Yeah, I mean, but the people like you and like me are a lot fewer than the people who want to hear the songs.
Well, I mean, Ghostbusters, you're going to want the Ghostbusters song. But I mean, God, there's a song on the Ghostbusters soundtrack. It's in one scene. It's on the radio in the background of a dialogue scene. You can barely hear it for about 5 seconds, and that song is on there. album.
Yeah, but when they put it on a record, then they can produce it on the radio. I mean, there's look, like Alan Menken, like, change the people, I guess. Alan Menken, who he's done years and years and years of Disney things. People just love his songs, and so for years he was getting best score in the Academy Awards, mainly because the only music that people recognize, people being the great unwashed in terms of music, would hear the songs. Oh, I really love the songs, and the songs were great. For the score was adequate. The score was fine, nothing wrong with it. But when you put them up against Jerry Goldsmith or someone like that, the best score very often, the best score on the Oscars very often isn't the best score. The one that the best
I have noticed this. Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of scores that these guys should have won Oscars for. And there's some guys you just wonder. They finally gave an honorary Oscar to Ennio Morricone.
That's right.
It was a final one, and finally he got his own Oscar. But for Pete's sake, all the guys in the world. I mean, there are a lot of guys like Tom Newman. I don't think he's got tons of nominations. There are a lot of people who just, they write great scores, but they will generally lose to a songwriter.
Yeah, it's I'll say this and we'll leave this topic here. It's criminal that you have not had an Oscar for best score, especially for Silverado.
No, I have no complaints because I'm in really good company, and
indeed.
I really don't have any complaints by the way anything's turned out. So
let me cover a couple of topics really quickly, and then I do want to ask you about your working with Michael Jackson. You did the score for The Boy Who Could Fly,
right?
Which is a movie. What makes this movie so great is that you've got this great story about this girl that falls in love with a boy who may or may not be able to fly. And then you've got this wonderful subplot with Fred Savage trying to drive around the block with his bike and defeat the bullies. And the best scene in this movie, by far, is the scene where he tools up all ready to go in his bike and he's got like marbles in the back. He's turned it into like a James Bond car and it's got all these devices and he's got a water pistol full of piss. And I mean, it's a great little film. I really regretted not seeing this at the cinema. I caught this on home video, but this is a really good example of the ending would not work without the music. A bit like if you watch the end of E.T., and there is this comparison on YouTube, someone's put it up, and you watch the ending of E.T. with no music and you watch it with the music of John Williams. It's two completely different films. One of them deathly emotionally empty. This is the same with the ending for The Boy Who Could Fly. The way that they sell that final sequence where the two protagonists launch into the air is with your score. Did you have, I'm just curious to know what the briefing was for that piece, and anything more?
I don't remember that there was any. There was concern that my theme, which goes all the way through the movie, was too similar to the E.T. theme. I never quite saw that, except
I'm not seeing that.
No, but there was a chord I used that John was using a lot. It was a Lydian thing, if you're interested in scales and modal stuff. But I think that there was just enough. I don't know. I mean, it's funny when people compare one score to the other. The score is very big and kind of John Williams-ish, sort of like that.
Sure.
But there was no intent to copy him or anybody else. I like the movie. I have if I can say this one really quickly.
Sure.
The guy who played the boy,
Jay Underwood.
Yeah, Jay Underwood. Okay, so I never met Jay. So several years, 10, 15 years after I did this movie, I don't know what, I had to, I called a driver to take a package from me to the conductor of the Hollywood Bowl because I had a piece that I had written for a general who had written a book called God is My Co-Pilot. And it was a book that was, it was a piece commissioned by the Air Force on his 90th anniversary or something like that. So God is my co-pilot. So I call up the conductor and he says, yeah, send me the score. So I call up the messaging company, and Jay shows up at my door and he's laughing, and because he knows who I am. And I, of course, know who he is. And I said, so what is this? I said, acting didn't turn out well. You're now a driver for a delivery company. He says, no. He says, acting went fine. He says, but I've left acting. This is many years ago. He says, I've left acting and I'm now going into seminary to become
he became a priest, didn't he?
I thought, wow, isn't that weird? I'm having a piece delivered about God as my co-pilot, and the boy who could fly is going into the seminary. I thought that's just too weird to put all together. Anyway, so that was my one meeting with Jay.
Yeah, Lucy Deakins quit acting fairly young as well, and I thought she was such a brilliant actress.
Yeah.
But then, you hear all the stories that have come out of Hollywood since then, and also like the things that happened to the wonderful Amanda Peterson, who's sadly no longer with us, and maybe she did the right thing by getting out.
Yeah, she was 15 when she did that movie, and she was, Yeah.
Well, Narrow Margin was a film that I got to see in the cinema because I am the biggest fan of Gene Hackman on the planet. I was so upset with his passing and also the circumstances.
Yeah, that's horrible.
I actually wrote to him when he quit acting. I sent him a really long letter, not too dissimilar to the email I sent you a year ago when I was one of those people who wrote to you, not asking for anything, just thanking him for an absolutely fantastic career and just many wonderful memories of films I watched with my dad. My dad was a big Gene Hackman fan. And one of the things that struck me about this movie, and it might purely be a coincidence, your score here was really stripped back. And this is a Peter Hyams movie, if I remember rightly. And it's predominantly all set on the train. And it's quite a dark score again, and it's very heavy piano based. And I remember when I was watching Narrow Margin, and I was thinking, this score really reminds me of another movie set on a train with heavy piano. I didn't mean in terms of the keys or anything like that. The riff or anything, it wasn't the same. Just the tone of it, the style of it. And that film was The Cassandra Crossing. I don't know if you remember The Cassandra Crossing with Richard Harris.
Fury, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And the score took exactly the same approach. It was like very stripped back. It was piano going fast or slow depending on the and I just wondered if that maybe influenced your choice.
Well, that's interesting. I know the name of the film. I've never seen it, and for some reason I remember that Jerry had done it.
It's George P. Cosmatos that directed it, actually. Again.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's one of his.
Well, whatever it is, no, I mean that's an accident. The reason it was sounds stripped back. When you say that, you mean that it wasn't as busy as I normally would do it?
That's right. And a lot of emphasis on piano and less instruments. And
okay, there was a reason for that. I had worked with Peter on the Presidio before this. Yeah. And Peter is I'll have to say I learned a lot working with Peter. He's very businesslike, but he wants what he wants, and he's definitely in charge. And it's sort of like that. I mean, if you disagree with him, you have a chance to defend yourself. And if you convince him, he'll go your way. But if you don't convince him, you'll definitely go his way. So anyway, I had the advantage of working with him once. So when we got this movie, I was happy to be working with him again. And he said, this is what I want. So he told me exactly what he wanted from the score. He wanted a boom, boom here and a chord there and a rushel here and all that kind of stuff. He said, if you want to hear your score, he said, I really want to hear my sound effects because this movie has a lot of sound effects in it. And he says, my impression, this is Peter talking, he said, my impression is that the louder the effects, the more realistic it is. Okay. I didn't agree with him on that one, but I'm not going to say anything because he's the director. So, but he was very clear about what he wanted. And what I did was something that often works with other directors who aren't very musical and don't know an awful lot about music. I translated what he meant, which was a mistake in his case. And so I took him seriously to the extent that he wanted to hear his sound effects. So I thought, okay, he wants to hear his sound effects. So what I will do is I will play above and below his sound effects, thinking that sound effects, and this is probably stupid, sound effects were sort of a mid-range thing, sort of like where voices are. So I made an orchestra that was very high and very low. I had no violas. I think I had horns, but I didn't put a lot of stuff in the middle. I had a lot of clarinets and piccolos and low saxophones and trombones, like I said. And the very first cue that I put up to when we got to the recording was a chase, because I wanted to start with something that was going to warm up the orchestra and get a feel of what we were doing. And I looked at it as we did it, and I thought, wow, this works great. I thought, this is just really wonderful. I turned to my music editor, and he was all, yeah, this is working wonderful. And then I turned around again, and there was Peter standing in front of me. He said, this isn't what I wanted at all. This is 180 degrees from what I wanted. And then he repeated exactly what he had said to me.
Right.
Exactly what he had said to me. And I thought, oh, he really meant that. He really meant that. So I redid the score. I did two things. I remade the score on the stand, taking out a lot of stuff until that he was okay with what I was doing. And I rewrote great chunks of it to be more like what he was looking for. So that it definitely was like occasionally a chord here, a boom, boom here, and that. And he wanted the action to go. And I realized I had seen some of his other movies where they weren't Jerry Goldsmith movies, or they weren't composers maybe who I even knew. And sometimes the scores they weren't as fleshed out as I would have thought, But I had seen his movies with Jerry. Like I saw Capricorn 1. I saw the one with Sean Connery, the space thing.
Outland.
Yeah, Outland. And they were big scores. So, I felt good in that. And he had hired me after all. And he liked Silverado, and he liked young Sherlock Holmes and all that stuff. But it was a specific thing. And it was difficult for him to get through, and it was difficult for me. But I'll tell you what was unique about Peter. Most guys, if the composer was that far away from the director in terms of the aesthetic of what he wanted,
yeah,
they would just say goodbye to the composer. Your tenure would be suddenly cut. You'd be gone, and somebody else would be walking in the door to take your place. Not with Peter. Peter said, he looked at me and says, "You screwed it up, you fix it." And I thought, wow, that's really that's really professional, because usually they just kick you down the street, and regardless of who you are, And his professional ethic was, this is your job. You've got the job. I'm not going out hunting for any other people. I chose you. You do it. And so you fix it. You get it until it's right.
Okay.
So we did. And so then I worked on another film with him, And I always had a lot of respect for him. He was, I haven't seen him for several years, but he was a hard guy to work with.
Well,
but
he was due to come on my channel this time last year to give me an interview, which actually producer Gail Ann Hurd was one of the people that facilitated that for me. I just interviewed her, which was a great coup, because, as you know, she's one of the most formidable female producers in the industry, if not one of the best, or if not the best. And very kindly came on my YouTube and did an interview. And I mentioned to her when we were preparing it, Peter Hyams, one of my favorite directors. Capricorn 1, and Time Cop and various other films of his are all sort of up there for me. And she said, "Oh, I know Peter. I'll drop him a message for you." And he agreed to come on. And I said, "Okay, here are some dates. Which of these can you do?" And then I never heard from him again.
No, too bad.
Yeah, life gets in the way. Perhaps things happen. I don't know what's going on in Peter Hyams' world. So I was just grateful that he responded. Hopefully, perhaps one day we will make that happen. Now I can send him an email saying, Bruce was saying wonderful things about you the other day. It would be great if you would come
You'll
on.
be surprised. You'll probably be surprised. But no, I mean, I'm serious. I'm not saying nice things because it's show business. I really learned a lot of stuff from him. And it's not like we agreed all the time, because my God, we didn't agree a lot. But I tried to give him what he wanted. And when he came up with that one, it's your job, you fix it. You know, and I thought, wow, that's really
I don't know if you remember this, but the Presidio and Young Sherlock Holmes in London both premiered at the same London cinema, and it was the Palazzo Cinema, which was just down from Piccadilly Circus, which had 4 screens. It was the entrance was on the corner on the right as you were going down, I think either the Haymarket or the next road over, I forget which. And the main screen was huge. It was pretty big. It seated about 600 people, sort of had a split in the middle. It was a bit similar to Empire Screen 1. And both of those cinemas were owned by the same company, UIP. They owned Empire and they owned Plaza. And so I got to see the opening night of the Presidio in Screen 1 there. And I also saw the opening night of Young Sherlock Holmes in Screen 1 there. I still have the cinema tickets in a box behind me. I kept them all. I've still got them all. So I saw both of your scores in that screen, and that screen had not long completely had their sound system refitted. It's such a shame that cinema's gone now, because it was a really beautiful cinema. So I got to see those 2 films of yours. Fantastic.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And the Presidio did have a great score. It wasn't one of my favorite films. I just thought the plot was just a bit average, but it had a great score and nice performances as well. And I'm a big fan of Connery and Mark Harmon. So let's talk about Moonwalker, because I'll confess, until I just double checked my research for this, I've got the Moonwalker album. I've got the soundtrack to the film. I never twigged you were involved with that. I'll put my hand up and say that's a Brucey that got by me. How did that come about? How did you get involved with working with Michael Jackson and Moonwalker?
I don't know. I just got a call. I don't know. He had done a similar kind of a, you know, I just did that one bit in. Well, no, I did a couple of bits in the movie, but the main thing with the
Smooth. You did you did the music bit with the Transformer, and didn't you do the underscore for Smooth Criminal as well?
There's a thing with a rabbit, which Smooth Criminal was a dance thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it's the main. Smooth Criminal is the main dance track in the middle of the Moonwalker movie.
Yeah, but it's also in the middle of the Transformer sequence.
It's kind of just before.
Right. No, I didn't have anything to do with that. I did just the dramatic stuff. And I mean, I really don't know how I got it, except that my name must have come up, and, you know, yeah, he's good, and get him, whatever it was. It was an odd movie, although I was very happy to have it. And the people I talked to initially were the director and I think one of the producers, although Michael was the producer on it. But Michael was on tour. So we saw the picture, and I had whatever talk I needed to have from the director and whoever else. And, you know, we got on, we made a little bit of a relationship. And the director said, Michael will call you. He's in Japan, but he will call you and you can, you know, meet him on the phone. So I said, okay, fine. So one night I get this phone call, and at that time, it shows you how technology has changed. On the phone, all I'm hearing is that long distance thing. And I hear this little voice saying, hello. And I thought, oh, that's Michael Jackson. What the heck? So we talked for a few minutes and introduced ourselves on the phone. And I told him what my ideas were about the movie and what I thought I was going to do, which sounded fine to him. And he says, great. He said, I'm going on to Australia. I'll call you in another week or so, and maybe you can play me some stuff. I said, yeah, that'll work great. So a week or 10 days later, he called, and same hiss on the phone, the same high voice. And I went to the piano because I think this was before we had a lot of synth stuff. I went to the piano and played the main theme for him, which I was used to doing with producers and directors and all this stuff. I'd done the same thing on Young Sherlock Holmes and Silverado. And he liked the theme, but he had some ideas. They were musical ideas, which was unusual. But given who he was, it wasn't that unusual. And so we worked out on the piano, on the phone. And he says, well, okay, so I'll see you at the recording. I said, so you'll be at the recording? He says, oh, yeah, I'll be at the recording. So I finished the score. And I think 2 or 3 weeks later, we hired an orchestra, went to 20th Century Fox to record it. And there was Michael. And he was just charming. He was like one of the nicest guys I ever worked with. He was very polite. He was very much in charge. The only guy I think I ever saw who was in charge, who was probably probably the least guy in the room who you would expect to be in charge. But I noticed that when there were conversations going on between the director and one of the other producers, Michael was zeroed in on that, and then he would get up and he would talk and all that stuff. So I mean, Michael was definitely in charge of the whole thing. We had a really good time. He liked the score, and that was basically it. I brought my daughters. He said it was okay to meet them, so my daughters met Michael Jackson. They got an autograph, and I thought one of my girls was going to faint because they were little girls at that time.
Right.
No, it was a really charming day. It's a nice memory. He was very sweet.
Why do you think the film itself didn't work?
I thought the film was really weird. I mean, the whole film, when I finally saw the film, it was just this cornucopia of weirdness. And I asked the director about it. I said, why does he have stuff about the Elephant Man's bones in there, and the stuff with Elizabeth Taylor and all the things that are sort of anti-Michael Jackson? And he said, look, if you go to Michael's studio, he said, you'll find notes on the wall of things that say things like, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. Or when people speak badly about you, take care, or whatever it is. He said he's always in a position of trying to make himself stronger. And he said, I can tell you that any bad news you read in the newspaper comes from Michael. He said, if it's about Michael and it's bad, it comes from Michael. And I said, why is that? And he said, because he wants to read it and he wants to take the full blast of it. And then he wants to be able to react against that and grow above it, right. Which I thought was interesting, capital I. And so the movie, which was, if you didn't know that Michael was the director or the producer of it, it's an odd movie because it's not always pro Michael Jackson. It has a lot of kind of negative things about him. Not this. I mean, this dancing is just spectacular. And then you see that, and then you go, well, what does that have to do with the rest of the movie? Because there were some other things in the movie that were kind of screwy. The whole sequence that I did was kind of screwy because all of a sudden we're going into a movie. We've got the Transformers, and we've got the kids, and in the middle of the kids, they all go into this bar and have this, dancing thing. I don't know. It was very odd, but it was fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Really glad I did it.
It was quite discombobulating to watch, and I remember I was working at the cinema when this was on, and the movie had been and gone, and then we got sent by the music company because the film just wasn't doing well. We got sent 400 VHS copies of the movie to the cinema to give away. No company had ever done that before or since, as far as I'm aware. And this was like weeks after the film had been on. It was only. Well,
the deal is that it showed as a movie in Europe, but in the United States, it showed as a video.
Right.
And it. No, I don't think it did particularly well, and I think that he fired his business agent after this movie, the one who he's making fun of in the Transformer thing,
Yeah. But I mean, hey, not everybody can say that they got to work with Michael Jackson.
No, that's I say it and people's eyes open. Wow, you work with everybody.
Yeah. I won't keep you too much longer, but I'll try and cram in a couple more things. One of the things that you also did around this time, it might have been slightly before or just slightly afterwards, was you worked on Amazing Stories, which again, Steven Spielberg again.
Yeah.
I really loved that show. My favorite episode of that, which I remember I showed my ex-wife, I dug it out, especially was the episode with the Gweeble. I don't know if you remember the Gweeble, the creature that would eat all the trash, and it looked like one of the things from Sesame Street. Kind of looked a bit like
I didn't see that. No.
Mr. Snuffleupagus, but it kept disappearing. Like that was a fun episode. But I noticed that you know, of your kind of alumni, you're all on there. Like everyone's on there doing an episode. You're on there. Goldsmith is on there. Brad Fiedel, who did Terminator's there. Craig Safan, who did Last Starfighter. That's one of my favorite scores of all time. Right. Last Starfighter. Alan Silvestri. You got Leonard Roseman, who did Ralph Bakski's Lord of the Rings. I used to have the double vinyl of that. And then John Addison, who did A Bridge Too Far, which I've got the vinyl for over there. These are all huge names. And then I noticed that you are the one who got to do more episodes than anyone else. You got to do, I think, 6. Yeah. And, you know, and you've got John Williams, I think, did 1.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, he did the theme, and I think he did the pilot. Yeah.
I mean, how did that come about? Was there kind of a meeting and Steven said, look, I'm going to get everybody on this. Everyone's going to get to do one. Was that, you know, did you all meet up in a bar, or I mean, how did that, how did that even work? I'm just really curious.
By this time, I had already worked on Young Sherlock Holmes, which Steven produced, and I had worked on Harry and the Hendersons, which Steve had produced. I would later work on Tiny Toons, the animated show, which Steven produced. So, yeah, so I was one of the guys that Steven knew. And I don't know how I got on it, but I was happy because I made a really good friend off of it. The director of the first one I did, which I don't remember what the show was called, but it was a Twilight Zone kind of a thing where a kid goes into no, it wasn't Twilight Zone. It was Psycho, where a kid walks into a movie and he sees Psycho and then suddenly becomes part of the show, or somehow they go back and forth. I don't remember the show too well.
Yeah.
And the director on that, Todd Holland, this was his first show out of graduating from UCLA. And, you know, it was good. I thought he'd done a good job. And then I got called back to do the second one that he did, which was something called Thanksgiving, which is a really good show, a really, really, really good show. So we did that. And then I did one with Sid Caesar in it, Mr. Magic. And then I did the fourth one. The connection on that was that the director was the set designer on Young Sherlock Holmes. And I just briefly forgotten his name, but so I did 4 of them, yeah. And the weird thing about, I have to say this about the Sid Caesar one, when the show was finished, they had a cast and crew screening, so I went there and I was seated next to Sid Caesar. Well, Sid Caesar was to me like the greatest comedian who ever lived, because when I was a little boy, I used to watch his shows on Your Show of Shows. You know, I mean, he was a huge guy. So I'm sitting there next to him, and of course I do the normal thing. Gee, Mr. Caesar, you know, I'm a huge fan of yours. And he was kind of like, yeah, thank you. Yeah. And then the director came up and he says, hey, Sid, have you met Bruce? Yeah. He says, Bruce did the score to Silverado. And suddenly Sid Caesar, his eyes go like this, and he says to his wife, hey, he did Silverado. And I'm thinking, no, this is too weird. This is really too weird. This is Sid Caesar. he's the big guy in the room, not me. You know, it was really kind of fun. Anyway, I enjoyed Amazing Stories. It was you worked on great people, and I say Todd was wonderful, and we're still friends. I did a movie with him later. We're still good friends, and he, you know, our families get together as much as we can.
That's lovely to hear. I watched a whole load of these in lockdown. Because you know, in lockdown you watched a lot of stuff. Well, I wrote 30 scripts in lockdown, but I also watched a lot of television, and it's amazing. These really hold up well. They really look good still. They're, you know, the obviously the format, I don't know what they were shot on, whether it was that new tape they were using for television shows that kind of looks slightly film Super 16, it was it or something. But so they have got that slightly dated TV look, but everything else about them, the production design, the score, the acting, the stories themselves, the scripts, really lovely, beautiful little stories.
Oh, I mean, he had big directors too. And Peter
Yeah.
Hyams did movies, you know. He did Billy Goldenberg, I think, did a score.
Yeah, I think Barry Levinson. I think Barry Levinson did one. Yeah, they're, everybody on there's a big name now. It was a bit like Spielberg. I felt like this was a job. Maybe this is why so many different people were on it. Where he said, "I'm going to give everybody work on this one. It feels like it was. I'm going to give all my friends work on this one. I'm going to give the talented guys I can see coming up work on this one. I'm going to give you all something on this one."
Yeah, like the guy who just got out of school. You know, he's been pretty generous over his career with a lot of people. You know.
Yeah. No, that's good to hear, because he's another one of my heroes. Most people won't have seen this movie. I want to mention it quickly because I think your score in it's really beautiful. That's Jackknife with Robert De Niro.
Oh, yeah.
For people who haven't seen it, De Niro's coming back from the Vietnam War. It's kind of a PTSD coming home kind of movie, except without the Rambo bit where he goes off and kills 400 people in the town. But so it's kind of like Rambo, but without the violence. Just the first 15 minutes of Rambo into a 2-hour movie. And I don't know if you're familiar with the work Kathy Baker. She's one of my favorite actresses. She's so underrated.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic actress. And this is a great film if you want to see one of De Niro's finest performances that you've probably never heard of. Was there, again, I guess you were left to your own devices to do the score for this one, but I watched this film again recently to prepare for this because I always remembered it. And in my notes, I put the score has a returning home vibe. It's got that Norman Rockwell, I'm coming home, coming back to the town, arriving back to the town, but somehow I've changed. It's got that vibe. I'm guessing that's what you were going for with it.
Well, that's the story, isn't it? It doesn't.
Yeah.
He goes back home because it's Ed Harris who has the emotional breakdown.
That's right.
Yeah, to be really truthful, this was so long ago, I don't remember the film really well. I remember doing it. I remember working on it. I remember all the people, and I remember enjoying it. I remember it was a small budget, and there was a trumpet solo in it. And I remember saying to the producer, he came over to the house to hear the theme, and I said, "This is not a beautiful theme." I said, "I didn't want to write a beautiful theme because this is not a beautiful movie. This is a really, real."
Yeah, it's quite
and I
dark.
would say of all the movies that I did, it's the only one that wasn't a little over the top, that wasn't either a comedy or kind of melodramatic and cartoonish. I mean, this was like a real life movie about a real situation that was serious. And I wish I'd had, I mean, I don't really have any regrets, but if I were to have a regret, it would only be that I didn't get a chance to do more movies like that, because I found myself sometimes playing things that I would rather have gotten closer to the characters, if the movie had permitted that. And a lot of the movies that I didn't, I was often playing drama, people running around or, fighting or shooting or something like that. But something like this, where there were no guns, as I remember, it was just these vets trying to figure out what work was going to be,
It's almost like a stage play.
Yeah, it is. It was.
Yeah.
Like it could have been done on 2 sets,
Yeah, but it's a beautiful little film, and there's something about it that I always just really, I liked the sincerity of the emotion behind the movie, and I'd forgotten all about it as a film. And then lo and behold, it's another one that you did a score for. There was a movie that came out around the same time, about 2 years apart from this, directed by a guy called Steve Campman and his business partner William Porter, and I think Stephen is still around, and I am trying to get him to come on. And that film was called, I don't know if you ever saw it. It was also with Mark Harmon from the Presidio. It was called Stealing Home with Jodie Foster.
Oh no, I don't know that.
I was curious to know if you'd ever seen that, because that's another film that I saw the first time I went to the States in '88. I didn't know anything about it. As soon as I saw it, I was like, I want the score for this, and it was very piano centric. It was it's the same composer who did the music for Saint Elmo's Fire. His name presently escapes me. David Foster. David Foster.
Oh,
yeah. Dave, so I don't know, in your world, I imagine there must be something like an annual composers dinner or something every year. Is there something like that?
Sort of. There's an organization that years ago I was president of, called the Society of Composers and Lyricists, and they have a holiday dinner. I can't say that a lot of the big name composers come to this thing. It's a great organization for composers, particularly if you're starting out. It's a great way of being able to get information, and they have screenings, and you occasionally meet people there, and you meet other people sort of in the same position as you. And it's always a very festive thing. And they usually celebrate a well-known composer as being composer of the year or some such. That's the only thing that I know of that has anything. Before the Society of Composers and Lyricists, there was the Composers and Lyricists Guild of America. That was a union. And that was something that everybody belonged to. Jerry Goldsmith, Lalo Schifrin, Henry Mancini, Elmer Bernstein was president of that. David Raxon was president of that. And that thing, they would have, I think they had holiday get-togethers. But these were guys who, the guys from years and years and years and years ago. Like I remember seeing Johnny Green there. They were old-time guys, Miklos Rocha, old guys like that. Heck, I'm so old. I've met a lot of these guys. Like I remember Johnny Green. I remember Rocha and all these, these people.
Yeah, that's where I was going, because I just think you've existed in a time where every composer rose that I've got a soundtrack for down here, and there's so many, rose to prominence during your lifetime. Their careers rose most of the ones I've got are the people that came up either in the 70s or the 80s, a few in the 90s.
Well, there are three guys I missed. One was Korngold. The other one was Max Steiner, who I could have met, and the other one was Al Newman. I never met Al Newman, but I did know Lionel, and I do know his kids, and I know his nephews, and I know a lot of his family. So I know a lot of Newmans, but I never met Alfred Newman. But
did you ever meet James Horner?
Oh yeah, of course. When he was just beginning, I remember he had just gotten into movies. I remember his name. A cellist called me up and he said, "Have you ever heard the name of a composer named Jamie Horner?" It was Jamie, not James.
Right. Okay.
At that time. And I said, "No, never heard of him." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I've got a date to do with him tomorrow. I've got a recording date. I've never heard of him. I just wonder what he's." I said, "I don't know." Within a year, Horner was within a year and a half, let's say, he was doing big movies. He really knew how to get around, and he was good. He was a good composer, but he was also very good at being able to do the Hollywood thing. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, because Battle Beyond the Stars, I think, was his first major feature
film. I think that was the movie that my friend called me about. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was all part of Robert Corman's empire, and he was another. I think he was a talent that Corman sort of recognized and pulled in. I don't know if you ever met Corman on your travels.
I did. I met him just to say hello, nice to meet you at an Oscar luncheon or something like that.
Yeah. Did you never think, sort of in the last 10 or 15 years, about taking yourself on the road and doing a live Bruce?
No, my life is so. I am such an unlikely person to be in show business.
Right.
I've been very fortunate to be able to do the things that I've done, and very fortunate to meet the people who I've met, and to actually learn from people. Fortunate to have some of the friends that I've had, but going on the road in anything in terms of show business or the career, it's like one of the oddest things I could possibly imagine. I usually what happens is I'm more of a teacher. Like, I've done a lot of teaching, and I continue to do a residency at the University of North Texas. And usually in places like that, I'll get together with the students and I'll talk about what it's like to be a film composer, as opposed to what it's like to be a composer, to be a stage composer or a songwriter or something like that, the different kinds of composing. And then I tell stories and I drop names, and just because they're like, I'll tell about Michael Jackson and what he was like to work with and all that stuff. And that's about as close as I come to going on the road with my act. But no,
would it have been the teaching thing? Would that have been the secondary business that would have supported you in between doing scores and TV shows?
No. I worked right out of college, literally out of college. I think I graduated in May or June, and in August, the end of August, I signed my deal with CBS. I worked for 10 years with CBS. 2 of those years I was in the U.S. Army, so I was 8 years with CBS, and CBS was what I think a lot of composers now use as their internship when they're working with other composers and they're learning how to do this and doing that. I learned a lot of that stuff, and I was in business. I ended up at CBS as being assistant director of music, and it was a business thing. It was a management thing. It wasn't creative, although I was right at the same time. From that point on, when I left CBS, I became a composer, and I was very fortunate to get busy immediately, and it just never stopped. It went on for years and years and years and years, and then eventually slowed down. And now, I mean, there's very little of that kind of work that I do, but I did something a year or 2 ago with John Debney. We split it. We'd done this before. We split a miniseries. There's one that's coming out called The Gray House that John and I did. And that's kind of fun because I like John. He can write anything, he's a great guy and he's a really good composer. So things like that. But so in the meantime, after I was doing all that composing, I would do some teaching. So I taught at USC and I taught at UCLA concurrently. I would teach composition. At USC, I would teach in the film music program. And then the residency at the University of North Texas, I've been doing for the last 6 or 7 years. I do it 3 or 4 times a year. I go up there for a week and really enjoy it. I learn a lot. I learn more than they do because you're trying to figure out what's going on,
Didn't you also do some music for some of the Disney theme park rides?
Tons of them. Yeah. That's like part of the best gig I ever had, doing theme parks. My favorite jobs were doing theme parks and doing animation because the film is done. The project is done. They don't go through and they don't reshoot and they don't move scenes and all that kind of stuff. It's all done. In the case of Disney, it's very, very carefully done. And the theme park things were always creative. I've had so much fun working on the Disney things. I've been fortunate to work with the same people for, I don't know, over 30 years. Because before I married my wife, I remember working on this thing. No, that's a great job. So yeah, I've had a good association with their Imagineering department.
I went to Epcot Center in 1988. I still have the postcards from when I went there that year, and I've been back again in the mid 2000s. And the difference between the quality of the park was staggering. I don't mean that. Obviously, the rides have got more advanced and there's a lot with computers and all that. In 88, every restaurant in the park was like a gourmet restaurant. Every food that I got in the park was amazing. Now it's all chips and burgers and, which is a real shame. It just sort of felt like you had stepped into this. I remember when I walked into Disney World the first time, and this is in Florida. When I came through the gates, it was like someone had said 5 seconds before I entered, "Lance is coming, stand by everyone, action." Yeah. And I came through the doors and there were all these, like double-decker buses with people on, and there were horses and carriages, and all up and down Main Street, there was stuff happening. it was completely immersive. It was amazing. It's not quite like that now. There's a lot of big queues for rides, and they were very good at managing all of that before. Maybe it's just the population's so big, and
I think that there's been, well, I mean, definitely in the United States, there's been a lot of changes in the last several years. And I won't talk about politics, but it's obviously, the changes have been made. And I think COVID changed a lot of things.
Yeah.
But the world has just changed. I mean, the United States is, I think Europe, well, in fact, I know Europe it's become very casual. It used to be one thing to wear jeans at a restaurant in the United States, but you'd never go into a restaurant in London and wear jeans. Well, now you do. You go into France, you wear jeans. You can do that. It used to be those Americans. Those are the Americans. No, everybody does it. The Americanization of the world. I don't know. My wife and I were in France, I don't know, within the last 10 years. And we decided one day, because I had a show on there, why don't we go see Disneyland Paris?
Right.
And I had this wonderful movie on called Cinemagique, which was made for France, but it was too bad it didn't play everywhere else. So we went to see Cinemagique, and we took the train. We get off the train, and I think, as I remember it, the train sort of leaves you off at the Disneyland station. And there's an armed guard. There's a guy carrying a rifle, and he's not part of a set. I mean, he's there because you're in France and you've had people doing this and people doing that. And I'm thinking,
yeah.
So the first time I went to Disneyland was in 1955.
Right.
I was 10 years old. Disneyland had been open for 3 days. It had opened on a Sunday, and my brother, who was 8 years old, I was 10, went to Disneyland on our own. My parents dropped us off at the gate, and they said, "Be here at 5 o'clock. We'll pick you up." So these two.
Oh, those were the good old days.
Oh, I mean, it was incredible, but you wouldn't do that now. I mean, when I became a father, I wouldn't take my kids and just say, "Here, I'll pick you up at 5." I mean, there's just no way in the world you do that. So the world has changed. Yeah. I would give Disney a break. I mean, it's a huge corporation. I think Walt Disney would be completely thunderstruck to know what his organization has done and what it represents and the movies that it represents. Yeah. But I mean, it's a huge thing, and I can tell you, working with him, you work with a lot of nice people, particularly in not at least in Imagineering, in the parks. You work with a lot of nice people. In the movies, you work with a lot of nice people. I've done animation stuff for them, and a couple of movies. The people are just great. I remember working with. I was doing a recording one day, and I was working with Roy Disney. Very nice.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you met anybody in the Disney family, because I guess you would have been too young to meet Walt.
Yeah, well, no, I wasn't too young, but I wasn't working then. I think I'm not sure. I think I saw him one time when I was before I was taking a vacation from school. But
maybe that time you got dropped off at the park. You happened to be hanging.
No,
about.
I didn't see him then, but I would have known who he was because when I was a boy, I wanted to be an animator. So that was my Disney connection. I know, but I met Roy and talked to him, and I've met a bunch of people. I just met a lot of people. Sometimes you just say, "Hi, how are you?"
Well, before we wrap up, there's a few questions in the chat. Would you mind if I throw those at you?
No.
Let me. I'll just scroll back a little bit, and if anybody's got any, now's the time to throw them at me. I'll do these really quickly. And again, thanks for persevering with us, everyone. We had a few audio issues in the first 20 minutes, but they resolved themselves pretty quickly. So I'm glad we persisted. This one's a bit niche, but I'll see. A question: have you ever listened to the music composed for games Lil, Bloodborne, or Expedition 33? I'd love to hear your thoughts on their soundtracks. I'm guessing this is because of that project that you did. Was it called Hearts of Darkness?
Yeah, Heart of Darkness.
Yeah.
Heart of Darkness, and this will sort of explain my answer. Heart of Darkness was, I think, the first game that ever used an orchestra, and it was produced by a French team. And actually, it was a great job because I was flying back and forth between London and Paris a lot, and it was really a lot of fun. And we did it with an orchestra, but it wasn't done the way that the games are done now. I know several guys who work in the games, not just guys. women. There are women composers too. I know a lot of that. There's a possibility of working in a game that's in process right now, but I really don't know. I don't know those games. I know a couple of the composers, but not for those games. So I'm sort of out of the loop entirely on games. They're done very differently than movies. They're interesting, but they're also done very differently than the way I did Heart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness is basically a 30-minute movie fragmented into this game. And if you get to, the only way to get to the end of the story is to play the game. And I've heard from people saying, "Oh, it's a great game. It's hard and all that kind of stuff," but it's not like contemporary videos. Sorry, I can't answer that one better.
No. That's fair enough. Let me just you've kind of sort of addressed this, but Keith is asking, do you ever experience something similar to writer's block when you're working on a score if there's a quick turnaround?
Never. I actually answered this question. I was doing a class for a friend at the Berklee School of Music in Boston. And one of the students said, "What do you do about writer's block?" And I said, "You don't get writer's block." I said, "It's like inspiration by desperation, because if it has to be done Tuesday morning, you get it ready by Tuesday morning. That's it, just it." What was interesting about that was that the guy whose class it was Bill Elliott, who's a arranger, writer, composer, really, really talented guy. And he turned to me, he says, "I just write something stupid." And I turned to him and I said, "What?" He said, "Look," he said, "if I don't have something written down, I can't make it better. So whenever I get what seems to be like writer's block, I just start writing." And I thought, wow, that is the best solution to writer's block that I can possibly see. Writer's block is usually a case, if not always a case, of comparing yourself to somebody else. And of course, you're going to come off second, because whenever you compare yourself to somebody else, you're always second. So don't compare yourself. And then now this is Bruce's advice, if you're doing something creative, whether you're writing a book or writing a piece of music or playing a solo or doing things like that, it's what you think. It's what you think that's important, not about what Shakespeare did or what Tchaikovsky did or something like that. It's what you think. So when you're doing a movie, believe me, some of the movies I've done, I've been the second composer on it. Some of the big scores that we talked about even today with second scores, where somebody else equally as famous as the guy who did the second score was the composer. It's not, there's no one way of being able to do it. There are 2 or 3, 4, 10, 15, if you have that many composers, ways of doing it. So when you get a chance to do it, you do it. So forget about writer's block, just start writing. And if it starts off kind of stupid and kind of nothing, fix it. Just keep writing, you fix it. That's what makes you a professional.
I think I know the answer to this one. I don't think you wrote the main Dallas theme. You did some.
No, that was written by a fellow named Gerald Immel, Jerry. Right. And Jerry and I used to work together at CBS. See, I know everybody. Jerry and I used to work at CBS when I first started working there. And Jerry wrote his first television show when he was working there, which was an episode of Gunsmoke, and did very well on Gunsmoke. The people he's a very nice guy, and became very endearing to some of the Gunsmoke guys. And as the Gunsmoke people went out into the world after Gunsmoke died, one of the shows that was a result of Gunsmoke was Dallas. So people that he worked with on Dallas remembered him, and he had met a few other guys, like the guy who actually was the writer on Dallas. And through that, Jerry and I have worked on shows, on the same show. We haven't worked together so much. Well, a little bit we have. But so we've sort of stayed in touch off and on for 40, 50 years, something like that. But no, that's Jerry Immel, Immel.
Fantastic. This is a question I actually wanted to ask you, but I'll let it come from. This is from Critic Al, who's actually been a guest on my show. I wonder how Bruce feels about AI. Scores are the soul of a movie, and I'm worried eventually studios will turn to AI for incidental music, at least, if not the main themes. Yeah. Okay,
so I would be really surprised if they didn't do that, because the AI that I've heard, I know a guy who's a professor in Texas who has been doing movies with AI, doing the music. He writes the words, and then he produces a song. when I first heard it, I thought they were pretty good songs. I mean, not great songs, but like B minus, definitely okay. He had singers that were entirely AI. The arrangements were all AI. All the music was AI, and for people who aren't really discerning, definitely on a movie, I can see people turning to AI. I heard until recently, I was on the board of ASCAP. I left the board a couple of months ago, but one of the publisher members, who is the head of one of the really big publishing companies like Universal or something like that, had been having a meeting with the director, and the director had done his own score for the movie using AI. And the publisher says, it sounded pretty good to me. So it probably did sound pretty good. But the big difference is, it's not Jerry Goldsmith. It's not John Williams. It's not it's not any of the people whose music you really enjoy, because it's not a human being. Human beings come up with surprises. You always come up with surprises, and the reservoir for human surprises is so deep and so great and so vast. You can never tell what another human being is going to come up with. AI. Yeah. AI studies people, studies the way things have been done in the past. So whenever you're using AI, you're kind of lurking in the past. You're not coming up with an idea from out there somewhere. Like somebody asked, what was his name? The guy who, Edison. Somebody asked Edison, where do ideas come from? And he said, ideas come from outer space. That's as good an answer as anybody else, because you don't know really where ideas come from. They come from God knows where. From AI, you know pretty much where they come from. When you use AI to do anything like writing a letter or writing a bio or something like that, AI hallucinates and puts in stuff that's just nonsense. So I don't know how it hallucinates in music, but I wouldn't trust it to anything of mine. Now, I would use AI in a shot if it were if it were a technique that it could produce to be able to do something I couldn't do with normal instruments. And I'll give you a film reference for that. A couple of years ago, there was a movie called Arrival that came out, and the music was done by Johan Johansson. I thought it was a good score, but it was a sound design score. And they were making 5 tones in it, and they had somebody else do the main title and blah, 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 blah. But the score I thought was really intriguing, and I thought it was a really good score. And I thought, wow, if you had AI. Now, he was really good on electronics and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not that, I'm okay, but not like him. If I could learn AI, if I were a lot younger and still really heavily into movies and all that kind of stuff, yeah, you bet I'd use AI, but not to come up with ideas. Manipulate ideas.
That's interesting that you mentioned that term, sound design score, because that became a really big trend starting about 10 years ago. And a lot of it came from Hans Zimmer. And Dunkirk in particular had very much a sound design score. And I couldn't hum the main theme to Dunkirk now, or indeed any of the themes from Dunkirk. I can remember that they used the sounds of a Rolls-Royce engine for part of the organic score, but it was a very organic sound design score, which served the film well, don't get me wrong. But for me, that film was really lacking one big thing, which was a big sort of blustery theme. I really wanted it to have a
okay, let me address that, and I'll defend Hans too.
Yeah, please do.
Hans doesn't. Hans will probably be the first person to tell you he never had a musical education. He never went to college and studied music. Right. He's a very clever guy. He's a very sociable guy. I like him, and I think that on the movies that he does, like those interminable movies that. What's his name does? Oh gosh, like Interstellar, those things that go on and on. And
don't get me wrong, I love lots of his scores.
They're so lucky to have Hans, because I don't know another guy who could keep that thing going. So that's one of the things about Hans. But Hans can also write a good tune. You have Pirates of the Caribbean. You have Driving Miss Daisy. He's got lots of movies where he's got
Crimson Tide.
And I remember John Powell, the composer. John used to work with Hans. And John said, Hans works really hard on his tunes. So God bless him. So he knows the value of a good tune. But Hans does other stuff too. And if he gets into the sound design, like you're talking about, where they use sounds of engines and all this other kind of stuff that sound effects guys do. Yeah, I can see him doing that. Actually, sound design, for my money, the first example that I found of it was actually in Young Sherlock Holmes. And it didn't stay in the movie, but in the scene where they go in the church and the church becomes a victim of the guys with the darts, and he's out there lighting candles, and it's very quiet in the church, and the music is very quiet. Originally, there was a chime sound that went right through it, which was unfortunately not in the key that I was in. And fortunately, Barry, the director, didn't use it. But I talked to the sound effects guy afterwards, whose name was also Bruce. And I said, why would you do that when the score's there? And he said, I have to do everything. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, maybe they would have liked what I did. Maybe they would have used that instead of your stuff, but I have to be ready for my end of it too. So I have to do what I do. Okay, so that I buy that. And I was just glad that it worked out the way that it worked out. But shortly after that, within a couple of years after that, I stopped putting musical sound effects into my scores because they became too much like sound effects, and they became too much like sound design. And I didn't want the score to be confused with the sound design, because sometimes the sound design is really very clever, but unfortunately you don't always get a chance to hear it before you do your score. So sound design is something that's with us, and when somebody like Hans, who's a pretty clever guy, and other people who are younger, and maybe cleverer in some way, or technologically maybe more up to date, they're going to do anything they can in order to make the director like it, So we're going to see a lot of more sound design. We're going to see a lot of scores that are mediocre scores. We're already seeing a lot of mediocre scores, and some of them will be produced by AI if they haven't already. That's just progress, right?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, when I talk, like even now, I mean, this is kind of friendly because people are they actually like listening to these old scores and all that kind of stuff. When I'm with other people, I can go in the past really easily. Like, I have friends who are my age, and if we want to sit and reminisce about music, or somebody's coming over, tomorrow's Thanksgiving, and I have a really good friend who's coming over to be with us, he and his wife, who used to be the top music editor in the movies.
Right.
He and his dad and everybody, I mean, he had the biggest company, all that kind of stuff. He's terrific. He's worked on huge movies, really big. He could do this, and tell you names of a story, people, and all that kind of stuff. When we get together, we talk about, hey, you remember that 10 years ago, 15? I used to work with his sister. Hey, do you remember when Patty did such and such or so and so, or when you did this? And blah, blah, blah. So we go back because we're old guys and we're just reminiscing.
Sure. But
now, I mean, you can't beat up the guys who are the new guys because it's their time, and the technology is completely different.
It's a very, I mean, it's the same being a filmmaker. I've got the same lenses on this phone that Martin Scorsese had when he was shooting Taxi Driver.
Right.
It's bizarre to think that, but it is just the way that
you probably did digital editing on your movie.
Yeah, I mean, I can do so much of it here. My friend Rebel Rose wants to say thank you for creating some of the most magical music from my childhood.
Thank you, Rebel. They're very kind.
She's a really dear friend of mine. She's going through a very, very rough time at the moment. Just some stuff she's dealing with. So I just want to give her a shout out, because very talented artist, Bruce. That's one of her pieces of artwork.
Wow. Really cool.
She just did, and that's hand drawn, by the way. That is not AI. That's hand drawn.
That's what I mean. You couldn't find that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Not something like that. So
yeah, I mean, it's great that there are
Rebel, don't stop. Keep doing it.
Yeah, talented, creative people out there like that. Oh, okay. Well, this is going to be the last one. I'll read this out. Every generation likes to say they had better taste than those that follow, but mine may be the first that is objectively correct while saying so. Thank you for putting a bit more awe into my childhood and life overall. Thank you.
Okay, I'll quote Randy Newman. You have a friend in me.
Well, there you go.
The same thing as that. But
Bruce, this has been absolutely fantastic. I can't tell you, first of all, what a dream it was for me to be able to direct Nick in 2025, and then we happened to be chatting in between. I think it was on the lunch break, and we were talking about the score for young Sherlock Holmes, and I said, oh well, I've got Silverado as well, and I was retelling him the story that I told you about going to see the film, and he said, I'm still in touch with Bruce, so that was
and corresponding back and forth.
It's great that you were willing to come on, because not everybody likes doing these, but I do think, as you say, you're from a different generation, but the stories and the lessons that you can pass on are absolutely invaluable, regardless of how the technology has changed, and just also hearing your own experiences in the industry. And I mean, we could easily do this for another hour and talk about your work on Jag alone, which you did God knows how many episodes of that.
Well, we could do it for a couple of more hours, and I'd talk to you about how much I like the work of some of my friends. I mean, I could go on for a good hour about How to Train Your Dragon with John Powell, who,
right,
is a terrific composer, and we're a little different, but my Lord, I mean, he and a bunch of, like, Al Silvestri. Al and I used to be sort of neighbors a long time ago when he was doing Chips and I was doing How the West Was Won. Al's great. I always like seeing his. There are a lot of guys but I could talk about their films too, and all the stuff that I learned from them.
Well, I mean, do let them know, especially the guys from the 80s and the 90s, those that are still with us, when you come across them, the music of you guys collectively has just fueled my imagination and been there for me on countless occasions. I regret I never gave away my vinyl. It's all still here. I don't have a vinyl turntable right now, and that's one of the things I said. If I come to a bit of money, because there's a specialist vinyl shop up the road, they've got a whole load of turntables and speakers. I'll get it and I'll start playing those records again, because they sound different. It's just a different sound.
Well, I don't have a CD player at the moment either, so we're sort of.
I never, and I've got a CD collection, but I always wanted to keep playing my vinyls. I never really, and so my CDs are pretty dormant. Plus, they get scratched so easily, and then they're done. But this has been amazing. If you ever want to come back for whatever reason, you're absolutely very welcome. If you know of composers coming up the ladder who you think would benefit from coming on here, please recommend my channel to them. We are here to support and promote the work of other creatives, whether they've done their very first score or 20 or 50 or whatever level they might be at. This is why the channel is here. We're here to support people, and then also to talk to the greats like yourself as well, people at every level. And it's so great that somebody of your standing comes and gives up their time for free and chats to me for a couple of hours, because as you can tell from the comments in the chat, it's really meant a lot to people, and they love hearing these stories, and it just reminds us of the talent we've really been lucky to have in our lifetime. So it's been an absolute honor to meet you. I hope you have maybe have time for a quick drink when you come to London in December. Do let me know. You've got my contact details.
Okay.
And that would be great. Maybe we can meet up with Nick, who I'm due to see in a week, actually.
Well,
but yeah, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go?
No, I mean, thank you, Lance, for asking me to be on your show. It's been a real pleasure. You're a lot of fun to talk to. The connection with Nick is fun because that connects us to the real movies. And I have to say one thing I didn't say about Nick, and I suppose he knows this, but he was, I think, one of the last characters cast in the movie.
That's right. Yeah, he was cast pretty late.
A couple of days before they were even going to start, they still didn't have the Sherlock Holmes movie. And then he walked in. And then Barry told me the story. He says, that was him. That was him. That was right there. He was our young Sherlock Holmes. So that worked out great for all of us. So we can almost thank Barry Levinson for getting us together like this.
Yeah. Well, if you happen to talk to Barry Levinson, please do that. I've seen many of his.
Yeah, he's a great director.
And a shout out to Nick Rowe, who is still acting. Do check out his credits on IMDb. There's quite a few interesting things he's been in recently. You're also going to be able to see him in my short film, All in Good Time. When I say mine, I directed it. It's not just my film, of course, but I directed it, and that will be on my channel for the public to see. I think by the end of January or early February, because we're going to have a London screening of it in January. So there we are. But yeah, okay. Well, thank you so much, Bruce. Thanks to everybody in the chat for watching and your comments. We're going to finish up actually with the Outcast channel song, seeing as this is a composer that we've got on. We've got a song for our channel that plays us out sometimes. So it's a bit longer than our usual outro. So you don't have to hang around for it all, Bruce. But if you want to, you can. Yeah, we're going to be back on Tuesday with our regular show where we'll be reviewing the latest film and TV shows. If you're new to the channel, what we tend to do is we tend to focus on stuff we want to recommend for you to watch. There's plenty of other channels that will tell you the stuff that's rubbish. We try and focus on the positive here. And also I have got a couple of special episodes coming up. We're doing one special episode with Critical and Northern, where we're talking about the new Polish drama series about the sinking of the ferry. I know if I pronounce it, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. It's Hellwezer, something like that, the name of the ferry anyway. It's a fantastic show. It's on Netflix. It's 6 parts. You should check it out, actually, Bruce. It's really good. And it's just not getting any publicity. So we're going to try and give it a bit of a boost on the channel. We're going to do that in a couple of weeks. We'll be doing that. And I've got at least 3 more interviews this side of Christmas with various people from different things in the industry. So do keep an eye on the channel for those. Bruce, thank you once again. Thank you. For everybody watching, don't forget to keep in touch with the people you care about. Let them know that you love them, because times are quite weird in the world at the moment. And a bit of love does us all a world of good. We'll see you next time.
Misfits and dreamers getting innovative. It's film, TV, and theater in the mix. Industry interviews where ideas get their fix. He's creative, we're creative. How about you? Share your passion, join the crew. At Outcast Creative, we're breaking through. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew. Interviews with fellow artists on the rise, and reviews that might surprise. Films, TV shows from back in the day. You might just find a hidden gem today. He's creative, we're creative. How about you? Share your passion, join the crew. At Outcast Creative, we're breaking through. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew. Filmmakers, comic book creators, stand up proud. Actors, musicians, board game designers, be loud. At Outcast Creative, amazing's the word. He even interviewed the legend, Gail Ann Hurd. He's creative, we're creative. How about you? Share your passion, join the crew. At Outcast Creative, we're breaking through. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew. So come along, take a chance. Join the Outcast, hang with Lance. Bring your vision, your art, your flair. At Outcast Creative, there's always room to share. Hang with Lance and the Outcast crew.